For those of you out there who are thinking about or are scheduled to go on a cruise ship, the film we're going to talk about today is guaranteed to set the mood right. And that film is the 2006 disaster movie Poseidon. Now this is a new Arrow 4K UHD release, and we're going to talk about this film in this video. We're going to talk about this new 4K transfer. We're going to show you this packaging. Now, this is a movie I did see in the theater back when it first came out in 2006. I'm going to talk about my impression of seeing it then. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films, and as you can see, I'm an avid physical media movie collector. And I've also been doing review videos on this channel for a little over a year now. You can check out my previous reviews and also my content prior to that. I have some horror shorts and some web series on there that you can check out that are quite awesome. Now, the 2006 film Poseidon is a remake of the 1972 film The Poseidon Adventure, which starred Gene Hackman and Ernest Borgnine. The 2006 remake stars Josh Lucas and Kurt Russell. Now, I had seen the 1972 version probably on VHS or something like that before seeing Poseidon, and I had a fondness for that film. I did like it, and I think a lot of people had a fondness for it as well, and so they were worried about there's a lot more pushbacks on remakes back then than there is now. People still don't necessarily like remakes all the time, but it seemed like it was even more of a pushback then. Now, another film that came out in 1999 that kind of set the standard for these disaster films was Titanic. And now, around that time, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, with this Poseidon Adventure being one of the last big budgeted disaster films produced during that era, it was like a very big thing at the time. I remember these were, when you went to the theater in the summer, this is what you went and saw, these disaster films, and it was a big deal. It's kind of now it's like superhero movies, and it may be moving away from that to something else. They don't know what's next, but this was 2006. The first Iron Man came out in 2008, so this is just the Incredible Hulk had already, or it had come out very close to the same time. So this was transitioning to that. But here, this is actually the second time disaster films were popular. Back in the 70s, when the first Poseidon Adventure came out, they were also very popular. Then they came out, there was a lot of other disaster films like Airport and Earthquake and things of that nature. Now, in this era, there was movies like Twister and Armageddon and Deep Impact and things like that. That was when you went to the theater and you want to see something on the big screen and you saw it. And this was kind of warranted, even though it is a remake. There was a huge jump in technology at the time, whether the CGI was not, it's not as good as it is now, but this still looks pretty good. And there is a pretty good bit of CGI in here, but there is also a lot of very impressive practical special effects, and there are some amazing sets in this movie. And it wasn't until I was watching the special features on this disc that I realized that most of what you see on screen are sets. They had a really big budget for this film. I think it was about $160 million, which with inflation, I don't know how that equivalates now. Somebody do the math for it and let me know. There's a lot on screen, and they had studio access, and they built like big parts of this inside of this cruise ship on these sets, and they look amazing. There's like some really, and they did 2 sets for most of them, like for some of the bigger rooms, because what happens during the movie and what this whole thing is about is the ship gets knocked over by a rogue wave. Apparently comes out of the ocean. It was really big and knocks over the ship, turns the whole ship upside down. Some of the survivors have to climb from what is the top of the ship to the bottom to try to get out through the bottom of the ship. And not everybody decides to go. The captain and most of the people on the bottom who are in the bottom, they say, we're just going to wait here for someone to save us. Unfortunately, it doesn't turn out too good for them. I'm not going to dip too deep into all the spoilers, but the characters like Kurt Russell's character and Josh Lucas's character, we have 2 heroes in this film, and they kind of end up working together to get a group of people out, including Kurt Russell's family. They're trying to get them out through the ship and all the stuff they have to go through. Now, there are a lot of scenes in this that take place around fire, around like water. There's water getting dumped on them. Sometimes they have to swim through water, and the actors had to do all this stuff, and they had to work in water. They had to go underwater. and do underwater photography. It was a very dangerous shoot, but it seemed like everybody was having a really good time. This was directed by Wolfgang Petersen, who also directed movies like Das Boot, The Perfect Storm, and The Never Ending Story. Really awesome director. This was his last big budget Hollywood film, and it, like I said before, it cost about $160 million to make. It only made about $180 million. It still made a little bit of money, but it wasn't enough to keep making these big disaster films, because they had just people weren't as interested in them. And I remember seeing it back in the day on the theater, and it was quite a sight to behold. This looked really big on the big screen, and at the time, I thought it was a lot of fun. And for some reason, even like Titanic, it was like, holy shit, man, that thing just broke in half and people are falling and all this stuff. But now I still like enjoy watching it, but it gives me a little more anxiety than back then. I'm not like, woo, yeah, that was cool to see that person just fall down and they smash on the ground. It's a weird thing. It actually gives me a little, like, just seeing these people having to crawl through these ventilator shafts and almost drown, and some of them drown and things of that nature. It's not as much fun as I remembered it being, but I do think it does, as it's going forward, it does bring a big sense of dread into everything. And I think that's it's not necessarily a fun thing, but it is a different experience for me watching it this time than it was back in the heyday of the disaster films, when everything was like, whoa, yeah, you see that thing happen when that guy just got blown up. I guess it can be fun. It just depends on how the film is done. This one is done. Now the characters, you don't get any meaty dialogue scenes. The dialogue's very sparse throughout it. They do focus on the action, and the action is very, very well done here. It's very exciting. It's very riveting as they're trying to make their way out of this very dangerous upside down cruise ship. So, but even like I don't think the dialogue's horrible, but it's just not. And it works. It actually works fine for this film. You don't need a lot of heavy stuff going on. You have some good actors. These actors they're into it. Of course, they're aided by these amazing sets and things of that nature. So they're able to really get into this environment and feel this danger as it goes on. Now, even in the first half of the film, there's not danger there, but it sets the stage in the first maybe 20 or 30 minutes before this happens, where you have people on a cruise ship just kind of having a good time. And another thing I didn't mention, this is a New Year's Eve film. This takes place on New Year's Eve. And the action, when this rogue wave shows up, and it's like, from then it's just kind of on from there until the end of the film. But the New Year's countdown happens, and then almost immediately the ship is knocked over. And it doesn't really take a lot of breaths. It's fairly perilous throughout the film, which makes it very exciting. And it does go through different stages. You have like the kind of having fun on a cruise ship at the beginning. It's a little bit dealing with some of the characters and their problems. Like Richard Dreyfuss, I guess his boyfriend or husband or something is supposed to call him, and then he doesn't call him. I guess they've broken up, and so there's like that kind of drama going on. And there's some drama between Kurt Russell and his daughter and her boyfriend and things of that nature beforehand. But once it flips over, it's everybody trying to save each other. And then the further it gets into the movie, the more like this ship is about to sink, and we got to get out of this thing fast. It becomes even more intense, and it kind of builds until the end. I think it has a very, very good pacing in this film. You're not going to be bored. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at this release. Now, this does have a nice slipcover on it. It is thicker than a lot of releases, but it's not as thick as something like this, Deep Blue Sea. Now, I had a lot of fun with this film. You can check out my review of this other Arrow release. Now, unfortunately, this one did not get the thick, rigid slipbox cover that Deep Blue Sea got, but it does have a pretty nice slipcover here, and has a new artwork on the outside of it. Now the artwork is kind of subtle. It's just got the Poseidon on the bottom. It doesn't look like anything too crazy. Now there is a reversible of the original artwork, which isn't really that much different. They're both fine. I mean, they work. It doesn't scream, I need to see this movie right now, but it works, I guess. On the inside, we have one disc only. Now, a lot of times with these Arrow releases, they do not have a Blu-ray and a 4K. Now, most other boutique labels do have both. Sometimes they don't, but Arrow very rarely does. And if they do have two of them in an Arrow release, the second one is like a different take of the film, like a different cut of the film, or a Blu-ray with special features or something of that nature. This is a 4K only. The special features and all that are all on one disc. We do have a booklet, and there's also, oh wow, look, here's In the Mouth of Madness, which I have pre-ordered. I can't wait to get that. So I'm looking forward to it. So there's a booklet in here, and this booklet does have, I just showed that to you upside down. This booklet has, there's the wave that comes and knocks the ship over. The rogue wave, and apparently I was doing a little reading on that. The rogue waves are real. They do form in the middle of the ocean, just kind of out of the blue. But they're typically not strong enough to knock over a cruise ship like what happens in this film. But we're going to go with it just for the sake of the movie. There's Kurt Russell on New Year's Eve, and here's the group. And there's there's really only one, I guess what you would call an essay in here. It says, Happy Goddamn New Year, The Hostile Universe of Poseidon by Priscilla Page, and she's the one that wrote it. And a lot of times in these booklets, there's more than one person that writes different takes on it, but there's just one here. And I read over some of it, and there's really a lot of pictures. Now, I do want to read to you about the transfer, or about the presentation. So Poseidon has been restored by Arrow Films and is presented in its original aspect ratio of 2:39:1. Now that is a very wide aspect ratio, and it looks something like this. So that's how wide that thing is on the TV. With 5.1 audio. The film is presented in 4K resolution in HDR10 and Dolby Vision, and the HDR looks really nice here, by the way. The original 2K DI files were restored in 4K resolution and color graded at Duplatec. DI stands for Digital Intermediate. So this film was shot in film, in 35mm film, but then it was edited digitally. So in order for them to get that file, they basically got the 2K digital file, they restored it, and they probably did some new color grading to it, and then they had to bump it back up. That being the case, I didn't see it didn't look bad to me. I thought it looked really solid as far as the detail levels and everything. Even the special effects in this film, even the CGI stuff, it all looks very nice. And there's an interview with a guy who did the digital special effects, or he was the head of the digital special effects here, and he talks about that, and he says he insisted that they shoot those digital special effects or work with those digital special effects in 4K. Now, before that, everyone was doing it in 2K, and that just doesn't bump up as big. You don't get as much detail in 2K as you do with working with them in 4K. It says all materials for this new master were made available by Warner Brothers, and so forth. And so that does give you a lot of information about how they got this new transfer and things of that nature. Now, as far as the special features on here, there is quite a lot, and there's a lot of new special features, and there's a lot of interviews with key people who were involved with the film. I do have some notes because I did watch most of them. The only one I didn't watch, they do have a new review with a historian on here that I didn't want to be influenced in my review by listening to that person's review. But they have an interview with John Sill, who was the DP. Now that video was shot via Zoom, and it's about 14 minutes long. But I thought it looked pretty nice. It didn't look nice at all because it was shot here via Zoom. But I thought he had a lot of really good information, and it was he had a lot of good information about how they shot the movie, including they shot multiple cameras, like 7 cameras, which he said that they called it TV for cinema, because a lot of times when you're shooting a TV show, you shoot a bunch of cameras so you can get stuff done really quick. It was advantageous for this movie because these actors are in some very uncomfortable sets and situations, and they had all this water dumped on them, so they didn't have to reset as much because they had like multiple cameras. They had 7 film cameras in the water and things of that nature. The second interview is from the set designer William Sandell. And he talks about the sets, and he talks about how there are real sets, and like we talked about earlier, and they had to do 2 of them. They had to do the upside down one and then the right side up one, and so there's a lot of good information from that guy. And then the third interview is from the super effects supervisor, Boyd Shermis, I think that's how you pronounce it. And he again has, it's a lot of good information, things that I wouldn't have known otherwise, and I've already talked about some of them during the course of this review. And the fourth one is from the makeup effects supervisor, Michael Deek, I think is how you pronounce it. And again, that was another a good interview where it kind of went more in the depth. And there's also a lot of archive special features on here that have been available in previous releases. So there's some behind the scenes and documentaries and stuff like that. So there's a large amount of special features on this disc. And for that alone, this could be worth it. So let's go ahead and talk about the 4K transfer a little bit. First off, the film grain. The film grain is there. It's not distracting to me. I thought it looked very filmic. And it wasn't overly done. I don't think this was cleaned up. Now, I will say that some of the shots, the digital shots, the digital like computer animated shots, especially the very first one of the cruise ship, which was at the time when it first came out, that was a very amazing, and it still is amazing, but it looks a little, like, watching that shot, that's computer animated, but it's still pretty impressive. And they actually incorporate some real footage of Josh Lucas into this one shot. It kind of comes over the credits, and it just kind of goes through this boat, and then they have two shots of Josh Lucas that are like matted into it in a way that's it makes it look like it's one fluid shot, and it is fairly impressive. But as far as the black levels here, I think the black levels, a lot of this film, the first part of it is fairly light, lit because you're inside this cruise ship. It's lit by these the cruise ship lighting, and it's still fairly bright. Once everything starts going wonky, they get into some darker situations. The darker areas, they maybe look a little muddy, but they don't look that dark to me. But you do see a lot of detail there because of the 4K, obviously, but you do see a lot of detail, and it's not nothing in it really looks too dark, but that's probably on purpose because they wanted you to be able to see more stuff. Now the lighting is very impressive, and as are the sets. They lit it very, very good in a way so you can see different depths of the room because of the way the cruise ship has different lights all around, or different color lights and things of that nature. So it makes everything look very dynamic as you're watching it. And speaking of dynamic, that HDR, the high dynamic range here, does help a lot. I don't have another version of this to compare it to, but the skin tones all look very natural to me when the lighting is natural. But even when the odd lighting happens, like the blue lighting or whatever kind of weirdness is going on in any particular room, red or blue, whatever, it all looks very natural to me. And the clarity, and I think especially like when you see the detail on people's faces and things of that nature, it all looks very nice. I really think they did a good job with this 4K restoration. Even though it is a 2K upscale to 4K, I think it looks fairly impressive. I would like to see a previous release of this to compare it to, but I don't have one. But let's go ahead and rate this release. First off, I'm going to rate the movie, and then I'm going to rate the actual release. I'm going to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. I'm going to give Poseidon, I almost said the Poseidon Adventure. I'm going to give Poseidon from 2006. The film itself, oh man, I'm going to give it a 3.5 star rating. I think it is a lot better than I remembered it being. Well, actually, I thought it was pretty good, but I did at the time compare it a lot to Titanic, which is a better movie, but but this movie, this one's different because this one's completely fictional. Now, obviously, a lot of Titanic's fictional as well, but this one's completely fictional. It didn't happen, but at the same time, it does seem very realistic to me. Unlike something like Deep Blue Sea, we all know that these genetic modified sharks, at least in the movie, we all know that they're not real, and it's kind of fun seeing people getting eaten up by sharks. On the other hand, everything in this seems real, and so it gives me a little more anxiety thinking about this is not as ridiculous as Deep Blue Sea. This isn't ridiculous. It is most of everything that happens here, even though some of it might be like big stunts and things of that nature, but everything seems more based on reality. I don't know how much the science would actually work if a boat flipped over, how it would actually go about, but it is a very treacherous situation. As far as what Arrow has produced here, I'm going to give them 4 stars. I think they've done a good job, especially with the transfer and the special features. It looks really good. I really enjoyed revisiting this film, and it would have been nice to see this got a little bit bigger a little bit bigger box like that, but it's still for what we got here. I think it is a good release. But let me know what your thoughts are on the film, and if you would do me a favor, if you haven't done so already, if you would subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films, and you see this box right here. So if you click on that box, it's going to bring you to another one of my videos. We'll go ahead and throw up some deep blue sea in there if you haven't seen it already. And by the way, thanks for watching.